She came to me at 10 minutes past midnight, packed in a cargo hauler's emergency thermal kit because that was the only warm thing the crew could find. The hauler's mate, a broad Verith male with grease on his collar and genuine distress on his face, carried her through my post's front door with both arms and set her on the intake table. Like he was setting down something irreplaceable. She was small. Lavender skin gone gray at the edges from the cold. Silver eyes that weren't tracking yet. The hauler's mate said they'd found her in a coolant locker in the mid-deck, sealed inside from the outside, told me everything I needed to know about how she'd gotten there, and nothing I needed to know about who she was. There was no documentation, no transit chip, no name. I told him he'd done right. He nodded and left because there wasn't anything else for him to do. I started warming her. By the time I had her core temperature up 2 degrees, the Port Authority ping came in, automated. They'd already run the hauler's manifest and flagged the deviation. One unscheduled biological passenger, unregistered, no Concord transit record. The classification that came back was unaffiliated biological material, Category 3. I'd seen that classification before, twice in 50 years. It means the Concord doesn't recognize the individual as a person in transit. It means they can be transferred to an institutional holding facility pending species identification and next of kin trace. A process that, in my experience, takes between 8 months and forever. I closed the ping and kept working. I put a name in my intake log, Sura. I entered her as a patient under my care, active treatment, critical status, which under the MedPost charter of the Concord Frontier Authority, a document older than the transit hub we were sitting on, means no transfer may be initiated without documented physician sign-off indicating treatment is complete. She was not going to be documented as complete. She was 2 degrees below where I needed her. And her secondary heart was stuttering in a way that was going to require close attention for at least the next 72 hours. She opened her eyes on the second morning. I was at the counter writing up my logs, and I heard the intake table shift. Soft friction sound, and I turned and she was watching me. Silver eyes. Enormous, the way Surath eyes always are. Built to gather dim starlight. Built for a world I'd never seen. She didn't speak. She watched me the way a feral thing watches you from the edge of your fire. Measuring not yet decided, I said, "You're safe. You're in a medical post. My name is Ren." And then I went back to writing my log, because I've found that the best thing you can do for a frightened child is demonstrate that you intend to keep doing ordinary, predictable things. By the evening of the second day, she was sitting up. By the morning of the third, she was eating. I'd found a nutrient mix the Surath biology could process, which meant digging through a supply box I hadn't opened in 11 years, but I had it. You keep things. In 50 years on the frontier, you keep everything. Because the thing you throw away is always the thing you need. The reclamation agents came on the 4th day. There were 2 of them. Concord Frontier Authority, Reclamation Division. The branch that handles what the Concord calls unresolved biological placements. They wore the gray coats, and they had the flat, patient manner of people who do a job they consider self-evidently reasonable, and they stood in my doorway and explained to me that they were there to complete a Category 3 transfer. And could I please have the patient ready, transport? I said, no. They explained the classification again. I let them finish. Then, I opened my intake log on the desk screen and turned it so they could read it. And I explained that under Charter Article 19, a patient under active physician care at a licensed frontier post could not be transferred without a signed completion of care certification from the attending physician, and that I had not signed one and did not intend to, because my patient was not yet well. They wrote something down. They left. Sura had watched the whole exchange from the inner room, standing in the doorway in one of my overlarge shirts, because I hadn't had clothing her size. She looked at me when they were gone. I said, "Sit down, I want to check your secondary heart." She sat down. I checked her heart. It was doing better. On the 6th day, she said her first word to me. Not a word. Exactly. A Surath tonal click that I recognized from the medical reference texts as an expression of proximity comfort, something a Susrath child makes toward a person whose presence they've decided is safe. It's a small sound. It went straight through me like a needle. I said, "Yes." Exactly right, and kept writing. The agents came back on the 8th day with a superior. 3 of them now, and the superior had a transfer order with a court stamp on it. The Concord's Transit Court, which has jurisdiction over unaffiliated biological classifications. He was courteous. He explained that the Charter Article 19E exception applied to injuries and illness of a coverable nature, and that his office's medical review had assessed my patient's condition as stabilized, which in their reading constituted completion of acute care, and therefore dissolved the exception. I let him finish. I offered them all tea, which they declined. Then I sat down across from the superior, and I put 3 things on the desk between us. The first was my licensure certificate. 51 years, frontier medicine, no disciplinary findings. Countersigned by the Concord Medical Authority in Veth Station. The superior glanced at it. The second was the MedPost's founding charter. 63 years old. Issued under the original Frontier Settlement Compact, which predates the Reclamation Division by 11 years. I finger on the clause that defines the attending physician's authority over patient welfare determinations, and I left it there. The third thing I put on the desk was my patient log for the last 8 days. Every vital reading, every treatment, every note, including the note from that morning, which I had written before they arrived, because I had expected them, and I wanted it time-stamped. Patient Sura, day 8. Secondary cardiac function at 64% of species baseline. Thermoregulation incomplete. Nutritional absorption index, below threshold for independent function. Patient requires minimum 14 additional days of supervised clinical care. Attending physician assessment. Treatment ongoing. Completion of care certification not issued. The superior read the note. He looked up at me, I said. My patient is not stable. She is improving, which is different. The charter makes the attending physician the sole authority on that determination. Not a medical review conducted by people who have never examined and who, if I'm reading your divisional credentials correctly, hold no active clinical license. I paused. Do you hold an active clinical license? He did not. I said. Then I'd like you to point me to the statute that allows a non-licensed official override a licensed physician's active care determination for a patient in critical recovery at a chartered frontier post. I've been looking for it for 8 days and I haven't found it. He looked at the charter. He looked at the log. He looked at his 2 agents, who had nothing to offer him, I said. I'm going to keep treating my patient. When she is well, genuinely well by clinical measure, not by administrative convenience, I will file the appropriate paperwork regarding her long-term placement. That paperwork will reflect her own wishes, to the extent I can determine them, and the available options under the settlement. Compact's unaccompanied minor provisions, which, I'll save you the research, do allow for humanitarian custodial arrangements with licensed medical practitioners on registered frontier. I folded my hands on the desk. This post is registered. The superior gathered his papers. He was not happy, but he was also, I could see him calculating it, not certain. And a Concord official who isn't certain doesn't move. Because the thing that ends careers in the Reclamation Division isn't losing a case, it's losing a case that gets reviewed. He left. His agents left. I heard Sura behind me. I turned and she was standing in the doorway again. 8 days of warmth and food and sleep had put some color back into her lavender skin. Her silver eyes were clear. She made the proximity comfort sound again. I said, yes, still me, she stayed. The paperwork took 4 months. There is a compact provision, as I told the superior. Humanitarian custodial designation, available to licensed practitioners on registered posts, for unaccompanied alien minors where no family contact has been established. I filed under it. The Reclamation Division reviewed it twice. They found no procedural error, because there wasn't one. I had been filing frontier medical paperwork since before most of their agents were born, and I do not make procedural errors. The designation was granted on a Tuesday. I told Sura that evening. She had learned by then enough of my language to understand the gist, though she still communicated mostly in the tonal Surath register. Clicks and hums that I was slowly learning to read. When I explained what the document meant, that she was mine to care for, and I was hers to stay with, for as long as she needed, she was quiet for a moment. Then she crossed the room and leaned her head against my arm. I have held that moment in my hands every day since. Small, lavender-skinned girl who came to me half gone, and the particular Concord officials who thought that made her easy to collect. They were looking at the wrong variable. They saw an unclaimed child. They didn't see that she'd already been claimed by the first person who put name in a log and kept writing. She is 15 now, taller than me, which took some adjustment. She wants to study medicine. I told her she'll be good at it. She has the right temperament, patient, precise, and utterly unwilling to let go of a thing once she's decided it's worth holding on to. I can't imagine where she learned that.